Hi, everyone. Today we're going to have a short interview with Amanda and Paul Schneider about B.A.N.K and its impact on relationships, personal relationships, family relationships. So let me ask each of you individually. I've heard both of you separately say that if it weren't for B.A.N.K, you don't think that your marriage would have survived, into the future. What makes you say that? Amanda?
So I know it sounds a bit dramatic, and we definitely weren't at a place of trouble when we learned about B.A.N.K. We have 3 boys right now who are 11, 9, and 7. And as any other parents know, when you have kids, no matter how committed you are to each other, your life kind of focuses around those kiddos. And I had been involved in a network marketing direct sales company for the past 8 years and was introduced to personal development as a part of it, and had done a lot of it. And Paul will tell you that he's been in the corporate world working extremely hard, and personal development isn't necessarily a part of that. And so in that aspect, our lives were kind of going that way. And while nothing was, I would say, wrong with our relationship or our marriage, we were just I was sensing going different ways. And when we learned the B.A.N.K methodology, we have very different codes, which can kind of attack, if you will. I'll let Paul talk a little bit more about that from his aspect. But so learning the B.A.N.K methodology really helped us understand each other more in that aspect. And then he and I both found such value in it that we decided to, both individually become certified trainers in that methodology. So now we work the business together. So while, our boys are growing and, we'll go their separate ways, we're even though he's doing his job and I'm focusing on this, we've got that common ground and that common language now that we work with and speak with each other at home and work on the teams together.
Well, and then we'll touch on that a little bit more. Paul, what about from your perspective? Why do you feel like that was the path you were likely on?
Well, I didn't know that maybe we were on 2 different paths, but I can see in hindsight that, with learning about B.A.N.K and applying it to our marriage, how we relate to our kids, and everything else, I don't think I was giving enough or understanding enough the personality differences and how much that could affect our decisions moving forward. And then what Amanda was saying about personal development and growth, I was definitely checking the check boxes. I've always been very supportive of Amanda, and she's always wanted something bigger, and I've always wanted to support her with that. But now I look back, and after the first of the year, and after we've learned B.A.N.K and gone through the first training and had some mentorship as well, I want to do more. And it's just after learning about the power of connecting better with people, and now I want to make a bigger difference in the world if I can, and especially with Amanda.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So how did you first get introduced to B.A.N.K?
I was introduced to B.A.N.K, it was about 5 years ago. Sherry and Esther lived here in Scottsdale at the time, and we're putting on a training. I think it was probably one of the current day iterations of B.A.N.K fundamentals, and I had mentioned before I was part of a network marketing company, and so I went because of that. At the time, they had the 4 cards, but then they only had audio files, 5 audio files to continue learning afterwards. And it made a lot of sense for me. I bought the cards, I trained my existing team. Paul and I learned some stuff about each other then, and I guess because it was challenging to keep up with, listening to the audio files. It wasn't an easy thing. It just kind of fell off my radar. I will be the first to say I was too lazy to unsubscribe from the ongoing email messages that they sent out through the years, and happened to catch an email last December, a year ago, and was at a completely different place in my life and really perked up. I was like, oh, I love public speaking and training, and they were looking for trainers, and I remember Sherry. I remember the B.A.N.K methodology. It made so much sense, and so came back across my plate a year ago. And Paul, do you want to take it from there?
Sure. So Amanda dragged me into this. I didn't know anything about it, and she dragged me to the first training course in California, and my initial take was, sure, yeah, seems like a cool tool. I want to support Amanda. I want to go to the class. And if anything, it's worth a couple days with my wife, So that's kind of the way I was introduced to it. And I took the class, and by the end of that second day, I'm like, yeah, this was worth it. It's absolutely worth it from a personal development perspective. Money well spent. I mean, just like any other class that I would have taken, in the corporate world or from college or anything like this, it totally worth the money. But what really started impacting me was, the weeks and months after, when I started applying it and just started seeing it in my world, not only with, with Amanda and with our kids, but also at my work as well, and dealing with people. So at that point, then I was totally in and wanted to really continue and dive in deeper.
Can you give an example, Paul, of a situation where that impacted that?
Something at work, you said?
Yeah, you said you noticed at work.
Yeah.
What situation? Right?
So I have an engineering background. I work with a bunch of engineers, and there was an engineer that I've always kind of butted heads with and never really connected on a real deep level, and kind of always wanted to avoid where possible and work with only when I needed to. And I noticed a couple weeks after training, I just realized, and I kind of had an aha moment and said, oh my gosh, this guy's an action guy, and I've been treating him completely wrong or different, I should say. And I just turned the conversation a little bit and started noticing some clothes that he was wearing, and mentioned how good he looked, and talked about how good his shoes looked and this kind of stuff. And he turned into a different person, and I would have never known. Just a couple of little things like that changed it. And then all of a sudden he started sending a lot of his staff to me as the expert. He said, he would send these emails out to his team and say, listen, Paul's the expert. He knows this stuff. You need to go get your mentorship from him. And so and all of a sudden work became very, very easy with him. And so that's an example.
So you were connecting on a whole.
Absolutely.
Great. And what about you, Amanda? You mentioned also that it has impacted the way that you parent your kids. How have you seen a change in that aspect?
Well, several different areas. For me, Blueprint is my last score, something that I know Paul would definitely agree with, that I struggle with. And we learned early on that our youngest is, Blueprint is very high for him. And it was really an eye-opening moment. It was like, I'm not giving my child the structure, the consistency, the rules that he needs to feel, stable and safe in his world. And, I don't normally, value those things, but he does. And so it allowed me a new lens with which to look at his world. And then secondly, it took us 4 months. We're still discovering things. We say you kind of enter the matrix when you learn the B.A.N.K methodology, and that's so true. And back in May, we had our oldest son arrange the cards and realize that he's I stuck my cards in my wallet, but he's an action, then knowledge, nurture, and then the Blueprint card he pretty much threw off the table. And so when you think about kids, and the B.A.N.K methodology helps us increase EQ, right? And most kids typically will either have a low IQ or we're working on developing their EQ. And so for a child, action, don't tell me what to do, and I have to win because I'm competitive. Knowledge, I know it all. I'm right. I have to be right, and I have to win because I know it all. And then blueprint, I hate rules, systems, structure, all of that. And that's a really challenging environment or mindset to have as a child when you don't have a whole heck of a lot of control over your environment. And so it really opened things up, and especially for Paul, and he's higher in blueprint, and when he's stressed out, the blueprint really comes out, and then they, butt heads. So it's allowed us, granted we don't have near the harmony in our home that I would like, but it's definitely given us, again, a new lens with which to look at that relationship and try to, bring additional harmony into our household. So
have you noticed a difference in the interaction between the kids knowing, about B.A.N.K and each other's codes? Do they kind of call you out when you're being one way, or say, hey, I need more of this?
Yeah. Not always in the greatest way. Zach will come by and, Grayson is our youngest, and Grayson, you're being such a blueprint. Knock it off, or, something like that, because, it's not one of his favorite codes. But I would say my favorite is Aaron, our 9-year-old. He's just, I would say a perfect nurturer is what we call, perfect 25 out of 25. And he comes home and just, Mom, so-and-so on my soccer team is a nurturer because he did this. And, he codes his friends and he speaks that language. And, it's just been really beautiful. And, we're being parents is so challenging, and raising kids is so challenging, and having this additional support in communicating with our boys has just been incredible.
And I've found the benefits after, especially me butting heads with my oldest and his, action-oriented personality, very strong action. It's usually this, gosh, we get so open and energetic, and we're just kind of, butting heads. And then when we finally calm down, I talk to him and I'm like, hey, dude, I know you're high action. I know you don't like rules. I know you don't like structure. I know you don't like me telling you what to do. But let me tell you something. I'm your dad. I just want to make sure you're safe. And so if you can just give me a little bit of grace there, and I'll do my best not to put in too many rules, but just enough so that we're safe and we're okay with each other. So can you deal with that with me? And he's like, yeah, I guess so. Just using it as another part of the tool in the discussion definitely helps, with our relationship and getting through, some of the tough times that we go through.
Yeah, and I just want to wrap that up with, the B.A.N.K methodology is so simple for everybody. It's also simple enough for kids to understand.
Yep.
Yeah, and that just ties in. I was thinking of how that diffuse the situation where sometimes you might get angry or frustrated with a person, and you think you described it perfectly, Paul, in that when you are saying what the other person maybe is resistant to because that's kind of what you need, you're framing it as that's what you need, not I'm just telling you because, and it makes the other person more willing to give you, even your kids, it sounds like, because they're seeing it from where you're coming from, as opposed to just kind of fighting, or you're different, you're kind of holding me back, or I want to do this, or do you find that to be the case?
Yeah, I think it's like those little kids are starting on developing their EQ earlier on than most. I think we're getting a little bit of empathy towards others. I think that we're able to share even between the parent and the child relationship, or even between them as well as siblings, and hopefully we can dial that up early in age and make these kiddos have some good relationships in the future.
That's been my biggest takeaway is, when I learned the B.A.N.K methodology, it coming back into life, my personal relationships, my professional relationships, it really turned situations where I used to get hurt feelings or irritated with people into, feeling empathy or compassion for them instead. And to be able to teach our boys at such an early age those skills, as well as, be able to see them each as their own and not squash any of those values and be able to support them in their own individual selves, you know, it's just so powerful and such a gift. I'm just really grateful that we found it.
Great. Yep, I totally agree. I feel the same way. Just a quick wrap up. What final words would you want to say around relationships and family? How you know, any other you know, advice or any pointers or anything you want to say to somebody listening to this?
Paul, do you want to go first?
I would just say you can't unlearn this stuff, and the more you allow yourself to really lean into it and talk with other people, and especially folks that you thought you could never get along with before, the more you learn about yourself and how you're able to interact with people that you continuously have issues with in the past are now open for discussion. And I love it as a tool, and I hope others can get that benefit as like I did.
I agree. You know, our on the outset, and you know, what really draws people to B.A.N.K is, you know, it's a sales tool, right? It's to increase your sales and predict buying behavior. But you know, when you really understand what buying behavior is, you know, we're all making buying decisions all day, you know, whether or not we're in a professional setting or a personal setting, a parenting, a relationship, different things like that. And, you know, being able to really zero in on, much like love languages, it's not about, you know, how I'm communicating, it's about, you know, what you value and being able to make those connections. You know, when we talk as a company, it's one world, one language, you really feel that. And yeah, I would just, you know, recommend, like Paul said, it's once you're in, you can't unlearn it, and you start seeing more and more of it, and the world becomes a more beautiful place, and it's easier to love human beings. So
yeah, definitely. And buying with, you know, with dollars, it can be, you know, buying into decisions, another way of thinking, being open. So really, you know, we say buying / decision making, you are able to understand what's important to the other person, so you can give them what they need from you rather than, you know, what you think they need, what you would need, and you give them that instead.
absolutely.
Well, thank you guys for taking the time to share with us, and I will talk to you all later.
Sounds great. Thank you.
And if anybody wants to find out more, just reach out to one of us, and we'd be happy to share. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Doc.